Rough and loose. This is what is the remaining of it. This was just bare ground, and they just try to create these microhabitats. You can see that it has little channels, it has higher heaps where it's of course drier, and then they put down these wood, which created a lot of organics. In there it actually looks even better. The other big thing that they did, they needed to howl in a lot of dirt to fill in the waste that they removed. At some points there were even like 2 meters of waste that they needed to excavate. Sometimes there were just little shallow areas. Rich Rogers told you that basically the soil or the dirt came from near Anaconda to his side. So in this area, these ranchers are making actually quite good money by selling their dirt, which is on their ranch land, and they putting it in here. It's a good public outreach also to the farmers, ranchers here, because they understand what is going on. And basically after a couple of decades, I believe, these areas will be again, some of it actually are still privately owned. So basically all these agencies needed to either buy them off or ask permission to actually perform the restoration actions. But in many times, if the owners, the ranchers, would not agree on participating, they could have the power to make them pay for the cleanup. But they would do it for them, but you know, there might be just some not that friendly ranchers who just say, well, you will not come to my land because, you know, it's mine. You don't have anything to do there. So then they can make him to pay or make him to do it. Of course, he will not do it, but he will need to pay for doing it somehow.
How do they haul the dirt into over here?
With all these big trucks, they just have.
So how do they prevent like severe compaction coming through?
It's a really good question. Oh, poop, big poop. Don't step in it because our bus stinks of poop. So the compaction might be released or might be moderated by the rough and loose treatment. So how they kind of just come in and with an excavator just do this, rip it up after them. Yeah, that's what it helps. You can see now really well the shoreline. You can see the soil lifts, which is again a really important restoration technique. And you can see that actually there's willow cuttings coming out from them, kind of still the same system. It's really well visible how they did it in the beginning. You can see one cottonwood growing up through those ugly deer guards. So I think I don't know, should it be a voluntary action or whatever, but those guards should really be taken away, because I think from this point they don't protect but actually harm the plants, because they look suffered, you know, in there. It's just
they can't grow.
Well, either that or, you know, they would like to bring out side shoots. Yeah, they cannot grow normally how they should. You can see it's very nice and gravelly in here. There's good sediments. There is fish in here. You just saw somebody trying to get ready fishing. John said he will try fish and show us what kind of fish is in here. But where are you, John? Why don't you show us your fishing skills?
You want me to?
Well, you could have in the meantime.
While you're talking.
While I'm talking, yeah. Okay, in the meantime, how I was just driving this way, I realized that, you know, liming is just such an important thing in that whole system. And you might ask, where is all the lime coming from? Somebody knows where it's coming from?
Don't you get from like burning oysters?
That might be one source, but they need so much here. They need truckloads and truckloads every day.
Isn't there a lime quarry in Anaconda? Or just outside of Anaconda?
I don't know if there is one in Anaconda, but I know that there is down there one in Drummond, and then there was one near Townsend. And they all, you know, just limestones, and they're mining and mining and mining them. And they estimated that if that's going on, like in a couple of good decades, there might be at these quarries, limestone mines or quarries, the size of the depth and size of those quarries might be as big as, for example, the Berkeley pit. Another good stat that I remembered is that I saw Georgetown Lake out there. Everybody knows where Georgetown Lake is. Everybody has been up there. Most of you, right? It's a lake. If you go to Discovery ski area, which you definitely should if you are a student at Tech, you will see Georgetown Lake. So guess, is Georgetown Lake bigger or has it got more water than the Berkeley pit?
I'd say about even.
No, the Berkeley pit has 3 times as much water in it than Georgetown Lake. That's scary.
Yeah.
You shouldn't forget that Georgetown Lake is really a shallow lake, while the pit, you know, it goes down. Yeah. What is it? What is it? It's a mile. Yeah, they say a mile deep, but it's what isn't that like? That 5,410 is only the level above sea level, but they went down, so I guess it's a mile deep. Okay, who has got a question so far? And I forgot, we actually have 2 guests join us. You know, you never met these guys. Is Willem Pavlu and his wife, what I forgot.
Lenka.
Lenka, exactly. Lenka, they came from the Czech Republic. They're ecologists, plant botanists. They're doing grasslands. That's their specialty, and they're here for a sabbatical in Missoula, and they decided to join us to learn something about the area. And if you guys have questions, or if you have comments, or if you want to just tell something, just let us know.
Is there like any unexpected like effects from the coconut stuff like through here?
That's a good question. They talked about it. You know, it's a new material to the area. Coconut is from the tropics, and sometimes they treat the coconut, but they say it will 100% degrade. They didn't make any environmental impact measurements. Good question, though.
It's not going to help the soil or make it healthy as
No.
it degrades. It's not
No,
gonna do anything?
I didn't see any studies. I didn't check for studies actually that evaluated its effect. About that foam, somebody knows what that is? What is that? Bubble bath? Yeah, somebody just washed outside here, right?
Somewhere under the
Somebody
bridge,
felt
someone's
stinky
bubble
and
bath.
yeah, I mean that's foamy, but it's actually as I understand, this is all natural. If you go to like Yellowstone National Park and you look at Yellowstone River many times where it's actually speedier and creates, you know, the ripples here, riffles or ripples? Riffles. They just oxygenate the water, and you see that little foam is just produced, and that's accumulating, and I think it's just the tannins in the water, so the natural compounds in the water can form this foam, and many people think this is some kind of contamination, but most of the time it's not, I believe.
So earlier you were saying that the third settling pond usually precipitates the most.
Yes.
Right?
It actually did. I don't know how is it today, but that's where most of the lime will
For that, you just want to get it all out at the end, or?
I don't know. I have no idea about that. We can ask someone why that is, why did they pick that one, but that's the craziest one. And I was out there with Gary Swant birding. You can actually visit the area. You can go out there and, you know, hike and look at birds on your binocular, but you cannot drive in. So, but Gary Swant, he has his permit, and we just spent a half a day going around, and he pointed me out that lake, and that had really relatively less vegetation around them. There was less willows sticking out from there, so it actually has an impact. And I asked him, does it have an effect on the birds? Well, they don't know, because what they do, you know, birds usually won't die here because it's not something that will be really quickly killing them. It can accumulate in them, and in years maybe they will be affected, but not something that would affect them directly. But I don't know about why did they pick it and why number 3. Anything else?
I have one question: how it this play looked before this doing? It was here before.
Yeah.
Because I was missing here.
So yes, I didn't live here, but as I understand and people told me the story, it really looked very similar. It had a lot of willows, so basically in spite of all this contamination, vegetation was coming back. And that's a good question, because I told you that the Clark Fork was treated differently. They really focused on the floodplain and the banks, but if they found, for example, very unique, very good vegetation that would be really hard to reproduce, they kept those. Even if there was crazy contamination below them, they kept them as islands to have the plant communities to propagate in the newly established system. So they sacrificed those kind of for the good. So again, not 100% cleanup below here.
Is there an aim to have 100% cleanup eventually?
I don't know. I don't think they can have that. It will be in the long term, but I think what will happen, it's just more organics will build up around it, and it will not be exposed, you know, because there is similar composition of rocks and stuff really deep underground, and they were once exposed, but life kind of just grew over them. But it depends how much can we get into contact, direct contact with those things, and if they go into our groundwater, we don't want that because that contaminates them in the long term. So they actually measuring. They probably have also a lot of wells and stuff that check the water quality also in this area.
Did they water the trees? Is that
No, you don't need to water those. So actually the water table is, so these guys in a couple of months probably, they are planted either in the fall or early spring, and their root system really early reaches the water. So you can imagine that the groundwater here will be really shallow, so you just dig a little bit and you will find water surfacing. They didn't need to water here, and usually throughout these restoration efforts, because it's such big scale, they sometimes water in the first couple of weeks if they did plant in a drier period, but the goal is not to do that because it needs to be self-sustaining really quickly. So therefore I was telling you that, for example, what Norm does, it cannot be it cannot be self-sustaining. If he needs to water it so long, how would we think that in one day that really will be self-sustaining? So these guys know. And I will tell you more about in Missoula. So they put in a lot of money in revegetating floodplains, and it turns out that even if they didn't do anything, in like 2 years, if they set the hydrology right, the plant communities came back on their own. So if you just understand what is going on, what is coming one after the other, then you will be pretty good. So, but still, there is a lot of, they actually still estimate like 20 more years of work here, which is crazy. So you can get jobs. Therefore, I'm saying, so restoration economy is also another thing that you can think about. So restoration creates a lot of work. And, you know, we talked about that in class, you know, who is paying for it, how is it paid? It turns out one party thought, well, it's not even paid for. The money here at this section actually ran out really quickly. They actually used up a good couple of millions so quickly that they didn't have enough money for phase 2. But as they ran out, they actually open up newer resources. So another 10 million comes from here. Then if that's running out, another 10 million comes from another agency. So that until it's done, there needs to be money going into this. Because if you just think about it, if it's not set back right, it can in the long term still influence people's life and health, and you don't want that. And it's because of they have a responsible party, and ARCO is behind that. They getting out a lot of money of ARCO. Poor ARCO didn't know what is going into when they bought that property, but they stuck with it.
I feel bad for them. They're paying for it.
Yeah. Okay, anything else? If not,
Actually, there's like little pink things over there.